in 1347, the plague, the dark plague, took place in Europe, and it had devastating effect on the entire continent. In England, for example, half of the population withered within 7 months. In Europe as total, 1/3 of the population withered in 4 years. In a province like Florence, for example, 1/6 of the people, of the residents, remained from all the others. But what does this have to do with the lecture that I'm giving today about stress? The idea simply is because I want to connect with you two orbits even more. I have found out that knowledge, if not being connected to a higher perspective or a narrower perspective, will not be able actually to give you a clue or a tool to change your life. So, actually we have 7 worlds. Whatever happens in one, imagine an orbit, small orbit, then a bigger and a bigger and a bigger. You can actually imagine this as a spiral that goes on from one to another to another to another. Nevertheless, the first one actually is the atom. The second is the molecule. The third is the cell. The fourth is the body, whatever, mind or an animal or this or that or plant, whatever it is. And then the fifth is nature as total, the interaction of all nature. The sixth is the earth with its whole anthropological evolution. And the seventh is the universe. What happens in one actually happens in the other. It is that understanding that could lead us actually, that connection, to find out the fabric that connect all of that in one fabric, one understanding. This is the clue of knowledge. Otherwise, you'd be so much specialized in one thing, and it will not really lead you to understand the totality, which I preach all the time, the diversity, which I believe in against specialization. So, though I have to talk about stress in a biochemical and in a physiological and in a biological content, nevertheless, I have to connect it so that you'll be able to understand how things happen. Buddha, for example, he sat under the tree of wisdom for 7 years. And then he stood up one time and he said, I know. And everybody looked at him and said, what do you know? You've been sitting down there for 7 years. How on earth you could know anything? You have not moved out from there. And then he said, because I noticed, I recognized that what happens in the fish is the same that happens in the grasshopper, and the same happens in the leaf, the same happens in the tree above me, same happens in the river, the sky, the mountain, the universe, the stars. He was able to connect all of that. Now, and that really is fascinating. But maybe one can say this is a myth, or, But it's the same thing happened to an amazing man called Carl Gustav Jung, who rebelled against Freud at one point or another. And he depended on the subconscious, which is more or less the interaction. It is that soft fabric that binds us to the entire fabric of the world. This is what really the subconscious is. There's nothing called individual subconscious. No, the subconscious is simply a tool, simply a door to the world outside and to the world inside, making us one of the orbits connected to that and to this, within and without. So Carl Gustav Jung, in his last TV interview, he said something amazing. He stood up in front and he said, I know. He got thousands of letters asking him, what do you know? Because they were able to sense from the way that he said, I know, that he knew. What he knew is the key, is that connection, how things are connected together. And this is what I preach, totality, diversity. This is what I believe in, and this is why I'm doing this in this way. So, coming back again to that plague that hit Europe at that time, we have to ask why. You see, the church at that time was so dominant, so dark, that all the time they had to portray man as a sinful, dirty being, that all the time they reduced him to nothing, reduced him to dirt, reduced him to a sinful, evil multitude of characters, of behavior, of choices. And by doing that, the people did not have any more vigorous connection with life, with health, with body. All the nude statues, for example, were forbidden to be used at that time. They've been destroyed, they've been taken away, they've been this and that. Those great statues that took place in the Greek and in the Roman Empire. Once the church came in, and then all this fanaticism and the meeting that they had at one time in the 330, I think, in Constantinople, where they had to write the Bible, because there was no written really Bible before that, to write the Bible and to make the rules. Without such rules, they would not been able to separate and characterize Christians from Muslims, from Jews, from all of that. And they needed that so desperately. Nevertheless, this is not the idea. This is the idea of another video to explain how religions were created by man and not the other way around. Not by God, not by anything else. Nevertheless, again, one more time, sometimes I just go around here and there. But it is very hard to have a diverse idea and then still try to put it into a content to be understood. It's like gathering, the stars at the same time and putting them into a bouquet of roses or into a cup of glass, into a cup of water. Now, so when this happened in Europe, when this pressure, which was mental, and thus it became as well physical, people no longer took care of what they eat, what they do. All the time they were herded by fear, by punishment. And that what made the whole thing collapse. Like in the body. Take anyone, for example, who is a fanatic religious person, or fanatic in his work, or fanatic in whatever they are doing. You will find them sick someplace, somewhere. Why? Because if we are unable to open up to the diversity of life, to the changes of life, you will never reach anything else. This is why, for me, a man like Aristotle is an idiot. Why? Because, wait a second, this is a mistake. It was Socrates, not Aristotle. One of them. One time he said, what could a tree tell me? What could a tree teach me? Why? He stayed all his life in his city, in Athens, speaking, using words. This is why he had an ugly face and an ugly body. And it was Socrates, by the way. Nevertheless, a tree have a lot to teach us, but he did not understand that because he was a victim again of intellectualism, which is only a specialized branch of knowledge as total. So this is why, for me, all this philosophy is only for idiots and will never be able to bring any sort of understanding or of clarification or of wider vision to the reason of life, to the reason why we are here. So, coming back to this thing there, once this happened, let's take what happened now with this plague there and how people were dying and all of these things, and then it stopped after 4 or 5 years. Now, at that point, those people who were living in Europe realized that neither God, neither Christ, neither the church, nothing had really helped. And there was a lot of losses. Like, for example, in Florence. The money that the entire population had hold on had been dispersed, and only 1/6 were able to take all the money of the rest. Now they have money, they have value. They can use it, but now they no longer want to become victims of the church. They no longer want to be victims of they no longer want to be a victim of agony, melancholy. They wanted to do something good. They wanted to do something beautiful. And that is the very basis of the Renaissance. It is a reaction to a stress that was taking place at one point in our life and in this whole community. And to that reaction, that healthy outcome of that death was simply to be able to open to art. So many things. It was a quantum leap from one status where in these dark ages people forgot completely all the knowledge of architecture, of agriculture, of machinery, of art, of design, of inventions. They forgot all of that. And now they wanted to try to bring that in again. This is why people like the family of the Medici in Florence, for example, who had money and they were bankers, they were looked at before the Renaissance as dark, ugly people who only handled with money. Now, when they came to that state, when they realized that they have money and they should spend it and they should live, they put it into art. And this is why the first artwork, which was a nude artwork, which was never been taken before, was by Donatelli, when he showed the statue of David to the head of the Medici family, and it was accepted. That was something really strange and difficult to do. Nevertheless, it was accepted simply because there was this tension again to break through. And a life-size statue was taking place, and David was predicted not like a muscular man at that time, but was predicted and put in and depicted as a soft, rather feminine body. That was really a very strong, leap. And then, of course, the great Michelangelo, the genius, came in, and he made another statue of David, which was 12 tons, 5 meters high. It took 3 years to sculpture. And it was as one nude, as one naked. Then there was this urgency to fill in and to make churches and to make buildings full of beautiful domes, very hard structures to do. The dome of Marie de Florel, I think this is the name of the biggest church at that time in Florence, was 46, I think, or 43 meters. This is something huge. They could not even know how to do it until a guy called Brunelleschi came in, and he brought completely different devices, machineries even, cranes that could be powered by 2 oxes. And that machine was made in a way that these 2 oxes did not have to regress in the opposite way to put down when they went to the clockwise direction to put up or to lift up. He made a way where the axis itself can go up and down, thus pinning into different axes, and in this way the oxes can keep on turning in the same direction without losing any time. These inventions and these understanding were not were hard to achieve. More and more things happened, like Leonardo da Vinci with the Mona Lisa, or they called the Gioconda, or for example Raphael with the School of Athens, Michelangelo again with the dome in the St. Paul Cathedral, which was called the Last Judgment. All these amazing works came in. So they came in again because of the catastrophe and the stress that was taken part in. Now let's add to the same object we're talking about here what happened when the Roman Empire had been split in 330. Constantine went all the way to Byzantium, and it was a ruined city at the Dardanelles Sea on the western part of Turkey, or the western part of Istanbul, and he built Constantinopolis. And he built that, and he started at the same time to augment, to praise, to bring forth again, and keep on going on all the culture, defending Caesar and defending Augustine and defending that amazing architecture and amazing power and sense of divinity and sense of gods, while the western part of the empire took more and more an ethnic line where Christianity took over, and then we had the Catholics taking place there, while we had the Orthodox taking place there until 1202, I think, when there was a crusade called the Fourth Crusade, that took place by one of the idiotic popes that lived there in Rome. He wanted to avenge, he wanted to unite. He could not simply accept that the church could be separated into two pieces. So he just sent an army all the way, and this army went all the way to Constantinople. And at one point, unfortunately, they broke inside, and in 3 days they robbed, raped, burned, and God knows what happened. At that time, many of the scholars took the treasures, the books, the informations that they took all the way from the Roman time and the Greek time, and the only place they had to go to was in Italy, in places like Florence, for example, or like Pisa, for example. So in this way we understand that the war that took place with the Fourth Crusade against the eastern part of the empire and the plague that took place, those two dark entities actually were the soil that had prepared for the Renaissance, one of the most beautiful, amazing, powerful movement of rebellion, of the tendency towards health, towards motion, towards beauty. There was no longer paintings and work and artwork which praises the god. At that time, at the medieval ages, for example, when the church would commission an artist, the name of the artist would not be even known. But later on, after that, it was the name of the artist which was important. And no longer one had to portray and to defend and to glorify God. They wanted to glorify the human body. They realized that the human body and the body is actually a part of God. He could be God himself. And this is why we can see, for example, that the statue of Moses was an angry statue, was an angry God. Why? He wanted to bring back, he did not steal, he did not copy, but he simply brought the theme, the energy, the essence of that sense, on that spirit of revolution, of strength, of pride. He brought it into that statue of Moses. And I've been there and I touched that statue actually, that have muscles and veins and strength. The amazing story actually, at one point after Moses made that statue, he told him speak. Of course the statue would not speak, and then at one point he was angry and he took a hammer and he simply struck that statue with, and the left arm is broken, and you can still see a glue, a part in that area there where the left arm was broken. To that extent, he was an amazing genius who was able really to bring a thought. And when they asked Michelangelo, how do you do this amazing statues? He said, actually, I see it inside the rock. I see a rock, and then inside this rock, I can see the statue already there, already buried inside this rock. All what I need to do is to peel it. And this is why actually, if you look at the stone or the marble stone that he brought, that stone, which was 5 meters and 12 tons, you can see that the upper part, for example, was bigger than the lower part. Why? Because he needed to have this arm there, so that size of the arm will take that upper part, so that you could imagine the stone coming like this, going down and up, and then going all the way down. And from this, when he looked at that stone, he was able to see the statue and the angle of the hand already there in that structure. But now, once we knew that, once we understood what is the stress, this mass conscious stress that had targeted an entire population, an entire continent, now we can understand how it happens as well when that stress targets us. So we go to this drawing that I will explain right now. Let's define stress, first of all. To define stress, first of all, I have to define what happens in my body. This body had been the product of millions of years of evolution. How the body was happened, it is very simple. But you might doubt what I'm saying, but this is what I believe it happened. You could find so many different cells in the body, and so many different enzymes and so many different catalysts and reactions and hormones. It's unbelievable. The more I go deeper into that, the more I'm dazzled by the fact that the only way that this could happen is that each of those cells came in together. And at one point of evolution, each cell in a different entity realized that the only way to become stronger and to get more energy is by combining with another cell. Like the mitochondria, for example. The mitochondria was actually a cell long time ago, and then it went inside the normal cell that we call a cell, and through creating energy inside that cell, it was able to have some sort of a symbiotic relationship. And bit by bit, it became a part of the cell. It became a part of the meiosis or the mitosis, the cleavage of that cell to become two cells. But actually, it was two different cells. So what I'm trying to say that the human body actually is a combination of millions of cells that they started to combine together. And at one point, they realized that without having a huge amount of bacteria down there, here, in the intestine, it will not be able to survive. So they made a pack. Bacteria was the first organisms, living material that existed in the planet 3,800 million years ago. Until now, we have from 7,000 till 10,000 kinds of bacteria all around the world. And we know not much of that. Nevertheless, it made a pack where the bacteria said, I have the knowledge how evolution takes place. Let me go inside this area there, and you go ahead there. I will be 100 trillion cells, and you will be only 20 trillion cells. That's the difference between the cells of bacteria that we have in our stomachs and the entire cells. This is why we can never take this bacteria inside of our guts for granted. It's connected to the brain, to the liver, so much, to the immune system, all the time telling it what to do, what not to do, what it needs. It have this communication. And those cells are like tribes, different kind of cells and bacteria inside our body, and they are tribes. They made certain deals, certain contracts between each other, certain treaties that says, okay, I am responsible for that. I will take this kind of group, you will take this kind of group, I will make glucose, you will make fatty acids, you will break this one, I break this one, and in this way we can have some sort of peace. But unfortunately, when we eat meat or dairy product or Chipsy or Coca-Cola or whatever it is, we start to damage those cells. And we start to bring other kind of bacteria that does not belong there, and then war takes place, and this is why you have diarrhea. Diarrhea actually is only a mechanism to be able to flush down something as fast as possible by increasing the peristaltic movements of the intestines, and thus not letting enough time for the reabsorption of water. And this is why you have water inside. This is what diarrhea is, water inside. Outside, I mean, because the body does not want to give enough time for that. So what I'm trying to say one more time is that the configuration of the human body was the combination of so many cells that each one have an enzyme, each one have the way to do things, each one had this, that, and then by this combination, by this diversity, each cell started to have its own conscience, and connecting this conscience together, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, this is where the soul is. It is that collective consciousness of all these cells in my body. And more things have to start to come newly. So we have to produce now insulin, for example, and we have to go to certain receptors, and those receptors, we have to induce them into cells that they did not have such receptors before, but now we have to tell them, hey, listen, if you want to be a part of this community, you have to accept these insulin receptors. And then it says, but I am a fat tissue, I cannot, I don't want to do that. Then we say, but you have HSL inside the food, which is breaking down the fatty acids. So block that when I'm bringing glucose, otherwise you can activate it. And a lot of these interactions, which is amazing, started to take place so that every time there's an action, there's a reaction all the time. And every time that action increases, it makes a feedback mechanism to stop the whole thing. and become back all the time into a state of equilibrium. So the body at the end had to have the state of equilibrium. And what does it mean? It is that state where we are in, this is very important, listen very carefully now, where we are in total harmony with nature, total harmony with the tempo, the teachings, the laws that takes place out in nature. Now, but we humans are really, really a virus that hit this earth. Yes, I know we have good people here and there, everybody says, don't judge everybody and this and this and that, but at the end, we had damaged this world, we had damaged this earth, we had damaged ourselves. So if you think that coming every day from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock to sit on a computer and to work for an idiot, all what he wants to do is to take, for example, to have a big TV set or a new car or a new yacht or a new God knows what, and slaving you in that way, convincing you that actually this is the right structure of life, then you miss life. All what we had created here was not at all in harmony with nature. We are going further and further into after money, like Friedrich Nietzsche said, man is simply the result of the lust after power. And that's what we do. We are only going after power. Power that does not really mean power. Power over each other. And this is why the image became the most effective thing. You go to Lebanon and everybody goes out with a lip like this, and a small nose like this, and eyes like this, and breasts like this. Everybody. Why? Plastic surgery. Why? It's the image. The image is more important. Once we do that, we had left the laws and the understanding of nature, of mother, of where we came from. And that is why we had stress. So, once we have factors outside that forces the body and thus forces the mind to accept a way of life that is not harmonious with Mother Nature, this is why we have stress. In whatever you can call it, in whatever perspective, in whatever means. So, for example, stress. Stress is actually accumulative. Since birth, it accumulates more and more. And that will lead that your sleep will not be a deep sleep, will be a light sleep. It is only through sleep that you are able to initiate the parasympathetic system to be able to heal and to prevent certain things and to be in control of regulating your body back again to its state. The stress as well affects the cognitive part of the brain. We have too much thinking, and when it is on, we start to have less of memory. Why? Because we are unable to focus, and this is why we have less focus. We have less attention. We have less tolerance to incompetence. And in this way as well, we become fat, because actually in deep sleep, you have 98% of fat burning. So, once this is happening, the stress as well starts to send signals from the cortex all the way to the hypothalamus. So what happens? Let me tell you exactly a little bit what happens, because it's important to understand that as well on a physiological, biochemical manner, because without understanding this, you will not be able to treat yourself. In the end, you should be your main doctor. The problem in this world that you are putting so much time to study marketing and business. How idiotic. While you don't know anything about your body, and whenever you get sick, you go to an idiotic doctor who knows nothing about how to prevent the causes. Instead of the normal, usual action that he would do is to give you a pill that could stop the symptoms. I just had a patient actually who was nervous all the time, and he had anxiety. And unfortunately, this anxiety, and this goes again to this whole thing that goes inside there, made some atrial fibrillation affecting his heart. And instead of the doctor going back again to find out why this person is in an anxiety, they gave him beta blockers. These blockers will stop the effect of epinephrine on the heart, which the epinephrine, whenever it has these receptors open, that epinephrine will increase the volume of the heart, the volume of the blood pump, increase the heart rate, and increase the blood pressure by as well affecting the alpha receptors on the blood vessels, making them closer, tighter. Thus, the blood pressure will also increase, and as well affecting the beta 2 receptors on the lungs, making the bronchi and the trachea more open to bring more and more air. You see, this mechanism is only done because the guy is in anxiety. What does it mean in an anxiety? It means that this person is ready to fight. We can count that in a moment, but we need to understand what it happens here. But what I did with this patient, I decreased the amount to half and then to third, and soon it would be no longer there, and I started to treat the anxiety. Started to take the anxiety out of himself through the food he eats and through psychological understanding of what happened to him, of whatever bad experiences took place, and as well through increasing his potential, increasing his abilities to understand. So let's just be patient a bit with me and let's follow this a bit. Now, what we're going to see. So stress comes down there here to the brain, and in the brain it affects the hypothalamus. And in the hypothalamus, it starts to secrete a certain corticotropin releasing hormone to the pituitary gland. Now, the hypothalamus is an amazing structure, an amazing organ. For me, it's the most amazing organ ever. Why? It is half nerves and half hormones. You see, the brain sits and says, I want to do this and this and this and that. Then he orders somebody to do these things because he would not go all the way down to the asshole to be able to tell it, open, close, or he would not go all the way down to the stomach to tell the intrinsic factor to combine with vitamin B12 so that it will be absorbed in the colon. But it had a messenger. It had some sort of a middleman, and it was the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus had to bring the messages, which are nervous messages from the brain, and transfer them into hormonal one, which are certain peptides that goes on in the blood to affect certain regions and certain parts of the body to activate them. And this is how it works. So the hypothalamus, and for me as well, the hypothalamus is situated in the most protected place in the body. I never thought of this before actually, but little by little I started to make sense. This is why it is located in the middle of the brain, protected by the skull at the top, and it is actually right in the middle. So it is protected from this side, protected from this side, from this way, from here, from there. It's right there in the center. And for me it is the most vital. And diseases that take place in the hypothalamus is almost uncurable. Unless, which will come in a different video. Nevertheless, let's follow that. Let's follow that a bit. So what happens when we have stress? Like you for example, suddenly found out that the commune in Denmark send you a letter through e-box, which is one of the most dirty ways to communicate with people. And you have to open numbers and name ID and put your ID and God knows what to find out what the hell they are telling you. And they tell you, hey, you have not acknowledged that you've been sick, for example, or you have not arrived to that meeting and that dirty job that we sent you to clean toilets. And this is why we're going to punish you by taking, for example, this and this and this and this and this day out of your little bit of aid, financial aid that we give you. And then you look at this and suddenly your heart starts to go up because you are living in a country that have no compassion, and which is Denmark. And if you don't have money, you have nothing, because people outside, they will not care to come and tell you, hey, I'm going to help you. So Once you do that, once it happens like that, your heart starts to pump and you start to sweat and start then what happens exactly is the following. Now, the message, there's two reactions. One of them is the hormonal one, and one which is a direct nervous one that goes all the way through the spine and affects the medulla of the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland are glands situated over, they are triangular in shape, situated over the kidney. And they have an amazing ability of bringing the messages from the hypothalamus and affecting many of the systems that we have in here by secreting certain hormones. So that is the first one, and we call it actually the acute stress response, which is we call fight or flight response. It means that either I had to fly away from this message that really had disturbed my entire being and disregard it, or otherwise I have to go and fight for them and go and explain myself, and they say, no, I am a human being, I have the right to sit at one day and paint. Of course, you'll be a loser in this last case, but nevertheless. So this is the first reaction that takes place. This is an acute response. This is now, instantly. And it makes this effects that I'm going to go on, but it will not stay all the time as such. That is, unless it became chronic, but we're going to come to that. So this is the first one, which is this line there, all the way, goes through the way to the spinal cord, and then it affects the medulla, which is the inner part of the adrenal gland, and it secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. And those are the ones that goes all the way outside, either to the heart, as we said, to the beta-1 receptors to make it pump, either to the arteries, to make them smaller by the alpha receptors, either to the lung, or either to many other things. They can actually as well go all the way to affect the liver and start to break down lipids and break down proteins, because the body is afraid and he wants to have as much energy as possible by breaking those lipids, which we store, and those proteins, which are our muscles. We want to break them into glucose because it doesn't know what to do, how to answer this commune in Denmark, who all the time wants only to slave you and to break you down and to reduce you and to make you a slave of the system. So that is the first one. So now we finished from the effect of ACTH on the part which is called zona glomerulosa, and let's see now what does it have, what's the effect of ACTH on the zona fasciculata. I know this is really fascinating. I don't understand why we had them from the very first beginning. They just make things more and more complicated. Nevertheless, maybe at one time a different science will come and we will have more human, more connected names and verbs and descriptions, rather than this ultra difficult scientific descriptions of things. Nevertheless, if you go back, we found out that they will secrete something called glucocorticosteroids or cortisol. Now, what does this do? First of all, it will decrease the space or the volume of the blood vessels, and that restriction will make the blood volume higher. Again, we have to remember that that person is in stress, and that means it had to put all its possibilities, all its abilities to fight or to defend or to be in a state of readiness, which is far different from being in balance. And that means he needs to have a lot of glucose, he needs to have sugar, he needs to store at the same time the same actions that a frightened person would do in times of calamity, in times of war, in times of famine. What would a normal person do? He will not have the capacity to evaluate things with the common sense. His main target is to pass that calamity, pass that stage in one way or another. So a normal person would take food, store it, for example, someplace somewhere, would try to find other kind of sources of food that could be, for example, stored, though they might not be, for example, stored, but he have to, like, for example, freezing things or smoking, for example, fish, or whatever he could do so that he could retain and take back the source of energy that he wanted to from food. So it would be easier for him, for example, to store beans, but it would be difficult for him to store fruits, for example. But it would be easier for him to have meat that could be hanged and dried and then smoked. And the same thing that happens to a normal person in fright, in calamity, under pressure, is the same thing what happens to our body. So what does it do? What it happens actually is that, as I said, we increase the blood pressure to be able to defend, to be ready to act, to move, to jump. And then it will do something called hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia is the increased amount of glucose in the blood. Now, why is that? First of all, he is afraid to lose the main source of energy that could keep him fighting, keep him going on. So how does he do that? He goes to the liver, and what he does, first of all, he will increase the amount of glucose deposited in the liver, and that is by simply increasing the insulin resistance. Now the insulin, the effect of the insulin is that it comes to the cell, it has a receptor. Once it has the receptor and the insulin is connected to that receptor, this cell then will be open to absorb glucose. And once it absorbs glucose inside, then it will be able to make energy. Now, though he wants that, but not now. He wants to store it. He wants to have as much glucose as possible in the body. So he will block the receptors of this insulin to keep a high level of glucose in the body. But unfortunately, when we do that, insulin is as well important to break down proteins to absorb amino acids. And at the same time as well, insulin is important to absorb potassium. Potassium is one of the most important things in life. It is the fourth most important element in the body after hydrogen, oxygen, sodium, and then potassium. So once we lose potassium, as we can see that as well, potassium is being lost from there all the way up there. Once we lose potassium, then the body will be able to go into a sense and a state of hypersensitivity to whatever action could take place. Maybe this also would be something good for the body to be able to be as responsive and as fast as possible. But at the same time, it will affect the heart, for example. So we have palpitation, we have arrhythmia, we have fibrillation, because the potassium ingredient potential between it and sodium around the cell membrane, that ingredient, that difference of potentials, that is what makes the sodium comes inside and the potassium goes inside through the ATP pump. This pump is what regulates our nervous system. We are at the end electrical machines. We drive and we move through electrical impulses. And potassium is one of the most important things. Once we lose potassium in this way, we as well become having, at the long run, we have, for example, muscle weakness, which is really contradictory to the fact that I would need to be responsive at this point. But the body does not understand fully what it is doing. Some of it is understandable, but some of it is not. Nevertheless, it makes as well what we call gluconeogenesis. Gluco means glucose, neo means new, and genesis means formation, production, making. It makes glucose from all the forms of non-glucose derivatives. Usually we have glucose out either of vegetables and carbohydrates, and this is where we break them down. But when we are in states of famine or stress or whatever, we need to have all the sources possible to break down this glucose. So we try to find it out from fats or proteins. So gluconeogenesis is a way where we can break fats, for example, which are our last store defensive mechanisms that we have, for example, with the proteins, and make them into glucose. It will increase the glycogen synthesis. Glycogen is simply a form where glucose molecules, instead of being separate from each other, they are linked with certain kind of proteins, and they form in this way storage. Usually we have glycogen in the muscles. We also have as well glycogen in fatty acids. We have it as well in the brain. We have it as well in the kidneys, and even in the white blood cells in trace amounts. Nevertheless, glycogen is a storage form of glucose. So it wants as well to be able to put that amount of glucose, that amount of energy in its storage, so that whenever it is in need, it will be able to have fast access. So it does as well fat deposition, and that deposition is usually in this area around the belly right here. It looks like ascites, which is water in the abdomen, but actually it is more like a sluggish belly that goes out in that kind of form. We can find it more or less here. It's called sagging belly. And a sagging belly is simply an indication that there is a chronic stress, and that means there are constant formation of fat deposits, and it is done in this area simply because the body believes that it needs to store that kind of energy, that kind of fat, as close as possible to the main organs, which are the liver, the spleen, the pancreas. All of this are in need to constant and instant production of energy from that fat. And this is one of the indications that you can really see on people who have stress. It as well suppresses the immune system, and that means that it will decrease the pain, but at the same time it will increase the liability of infection. And thus in this way we are more liable to have chronic fibromyalgia, chronic pain, arthritis and tendinitis. Now the factor why it does something like that, because it wants to focus and to concentrate on the major problem, which is to solve that stressing factor, that unexpected stressing factor that just suddenly came into his being. So to alert the immune system, which maybe and might seem illogical not to alert, because we somehow think of the immune system as well a part to defend, but he is not concentrating on defending himself at this moment, because to alert the immune system means he has to produce more and more protein, and to have to give more attention to that kind of production of amino acids, which he does not need. All what he wants now is to be able to take whatever protein or fat or glucose available and store it or convert it into energy. That is why the immune system in stressed people becomes low. Now, by protein breaking down, that as well will be contributing to the destruction and the atrophy of thigh muscles and muscles of all. Why? Because it is stopped the synthesis of proteins and had enhanced more the protein breakdown, again to be able to take enough energy for itself. So once it is increasing the protein breakdown, that will contribute to the breaking down as well of the muscles. The body does not want to form muscles. It wants to use those proteins, those amino acids, to be able to convert them into glucose, or what it thinks of how to take glucose. This is why we would have weak knees. We would have, for example, weak and tender joints. We would have inflammation, because this as well would add with the decrease of the effectiveness of the immune system, which, as we said, would lead again to certain chronic arthritis and tendinitis and pain in the joints and in the muscles. So the reaction of the body at this moment are really catastrophic for the balance that we need. It would as well increase the osteoclastic activities in the bone, that is leading to osteoporosis, and which is the removing actually of the calcium. We said that we lose a lot of the calcium as well after the body because of the reaction. Losing the calcium will lead to fragility of the bone and the high possibility of breaking such bone. And now we come to the last one, which is the zona reticularis. And there it is affecting the androgens. Androgens are the sex hormones, and they have different effects on males or females. On the male, they simply will enhance the growth of the prostata, and at the same time it will increase the muscular characteristics. The muscular characteristics are having more beard, for example. The hair will lose its thickness at this part. It becomes more and more thicker on the other side. There will be movement or change of the growth of the hair in the chest. these, you think, why would one do something as such? It's actually a compensating factor. When we feel more or less that we are weak and we are unable to function properly, we try to compensate that. Men compensate that by showing their virility. And their virility, more or less, will be in having stronger sexual drive, in having more prostate growth, in having thicker hair in their beard and in their mustaches. It's a way where the body, through after all these thousands of years, found a way to compensate. We always the time compensate. Compensation is a part of the stressful life that we live in. And this is why you find, for example, a guy who had made so many millions in the bank, the only way he could compensate, because he doesn't have such a big sexual abilities, he will buy, for example, a big car. That's a way of compensating. We all do that in one way or another. Now, on the female, it affects the estrogen. Now, it affects the formation of androgens and the adrenoandrogens. And that will increase the libido, which is the sex drive, and that would lead as well to high risk of polycystic ovarian syndrome or polycystic ovarian disease or cancer or whatever it is. It is the follicles that where the egg would be formed, and that follicle is actually a vesicle, and it could increase something like that. So, as we can see, more or less, that the effect of of stress is actually dramatic. But what happens when it becomes chronic? As we said, we have the direct effect, which is the fight-flight effect. Either we flee, either we fight. But we have as well the chronic. If this will continue keeping on and on and on, that would lead me at the end to weakness in the body. It will lead me at the end to weak heart function, to constant hypertension, to loss of electrolytes, to many different things. I will state them here as such. First of all, we have fluid retention in the ankles. We have high blood pressure. We have high cortisol. We have high cholesterol. We have acid reflux. We have diabetes as well. We have as well insulin resistance, which will lead as well to diabetes. We have ulcers. We have low vitamin D levels. And we have, why low vitamin D levels? Because vitamin D is depending as well on calcium to be able to be absorbed and to be formed. Vitamin B actually is the only vitamin which is not really a vitamin, it's only a hormone, simply because it is formed first of all in the body from the cortisol or the cholesterol, and then the ultraviolet rays will be able to activate it into 7-dehydrocholesterol, which after that becomes activated in the liver, and then after that activated to the final product in the kidney, which is vitamin D. But without calcium, it will not be able to be rendered active. The calcium is what really activates something like that. And this is why loss of calcium will lead to loss of vitamin D. So people who take vitamin D as pills is ridiculous, because it would do nothing. You just simply have to be in the sun. You're not in the sun, you cannot form vitamin D. To continue, we have low vitamin D levels, we have sinuses, and we have coronary restrictions, and that would lead to heart pain. These are more or less the symptoms of what goes on in the body when we are having a chronic stress. Chronic stress is one of the most important things in life, and the good news about that if we could go through that, if we could pass that, whatever would come later on will be a relief. Like we explained at the beginning, that after the plague in 1347, the Renaissance period was simply uplifting. But the idea as well, I wanted to tell you that there is no way you can treat the symptoms on their own. You will never be able to treat, for example, the symptoms of the heart palpitation simply by having beta blockers. You will never be able, for example, to treat the irritability of your muscles and the weakness of your muscles by having only calcium and having as well potassium, because as well the body will have to get rid of them subconsciously through the filtration mechanism in the kidney. We cannot treat the symptom. We have to go at the beginning to the cause. Without treating the cause, we will never be able to understand how the small details functions. We cannot go to the details unless we are able to understand the main spring, the main influx. The whole idea of me showing all of that and relating it to a anthropological incidences or happenings is to try to put you into that way of thinking where you will be able to know what goes inside your body, and at the same time you will be able as well to address that in a more knowledgeable, I don't want to say scientific, but more knowledgeable way, where you will be able to be your own doctor, where you will be able to have a say in what goes inside your body, to understand what happens. Now we are living all the time constantly into constant stress. Constant stress has become the main disease, and it's leading to all the other diseases. All the kinds of diabetes 2 and diabetes 3 are actually a reaction to that. All the kinds of heart diseases that we have and are an effect and a result of that. Many of the eczemas that we have, many of the constipation, the diarrhea, all of that, at the end are simple details of the main problem, which is stress. And unless you will be able to confront the fact that living in the system, living pursuing money, living pursuing status, living pursuing glamour, unless you can confront that fact that it will not lead to anything except the destruction of your body and the destruction of your soul, unless you don't want to confront something like that, you will never be able to reach any kind of happiness and any kind of equilibrium. There is no way out of that. Doctors at the end are imbeciles because they only come to the symptom, and this is why they give you only 5 minutes of the time and they charge you God knows how much. And the doctors in the hospitals are more imbeciles because they are so much rigid, so much stuck in their choices all the time. They have to report to other people and other decisions have to be taken in consideration, and all this thing becomes one big balagan. And it will not bring you any sort of changes or relief or health. The idea behind this film is to make you in control of yourself, to give you knowledge, and to tell you there is another way out. There are alternatives, but you have to seek those alternatives away from the internet and away from McDonald's and away from American lifestyles and away from plastic surgery and away from eating food that is injected with the pesticides and with the chemicals, and you need to go and start to eat in organic ways. You have to go back. We have sabotaged time. We have sabotaged the value of time. We have sabotaged the concept or the relationship, the bond, the connection between who we are and what Mother Nature constantly tries to teach us, tries to show us, tries to brings us back to understanding. The choice at the end is yours. My mission here is simply to advise, to explain, and to guide. And please do not subscribe. Those who subscribe and those who have films and documentaries in the internet, in YouTube, who all the time from the beginning and at the end they ask you to subscribe, those are there for the money. So for me, no matter who you are, as long as you subscribe, you are devoid of true knowledge. You are a cheater. you are not original. Even if what you explained could be original, but your main aim, your main goal is simply to gain money out of YouTube. I do not do that. I do not want that. Not that because I'm rich, on the contrary, but because I am here only to satisfy and comply with the message I was bestowed with from the beginning of my life. Nothing else. Thank you, and for another film.